Welcome back to the Measure What Matters series, video number 6, 5 additional metrics to measure. I'm Gilit Saporta, Senior Director of Analytics for the product group at Double Verify, and I'm a fraud fighter.
And I'm Shoshana Maraney, founder of Longform Labs, and I've been making fraud easy to understand for nearly a decade. I'm also Gilit's co-author of Practical Fraud Prevention, a fraud analytics training book published by O'Reilly in 2022. In this video, we're going to focus on 5 metrics beyond chargebacks and approvals. We'll briefly look at insult or false decline rate, chargeback recovery rate, customer service call volume, customer lifetime value, and ATO impact on customer loyalty.
So let's dive in with false declines. I was a bit shocked to see in the Fraudology fraud benchmarking survey that only 57% of respondents reported that they calculated their company's false positive rates at all. Not only that, but more than a fifth of respondents to the report showed that they aren't that worried about false declines. But there's a reason why false declines are also called insults. Customers hate false declines. That same survey found that 21% of respondent organizations have an approval rate below 86%, and that's just not good enough. As we discussed in video 5 of this series, finding the right balance between chargebacks and approval rates is the great challenge of fraud prevention. And if your approval rate is consistently below 86%, then really you have a false decline problem. To be a bit brutal, you must be turning away good orders, and you're doing it for the wrong reasons. You should invest more in making your fraud decisions more accurate, because not only is your company losing out on those sales that you're declining, but the customers that you have insulted will likely not be coming back, and that amounts to a whole lot of lost revenue.
False declines are important because measuring false declines and analyzing them to work out what you could change in your systems to make them an approval in future is one of the most powerful ways fraud teams can boost their company's bottom line. So, how do companies do this? The most popular ways involve reviewing and researching decline transactions. Companies are divided, about 50-50, between those who review all declines to see which could have been saved, and those which review a sample of all declines. Depending on the size of your team and the number of orders you receive, sampling may be a preference or sheer necessity. But either way, as long as your sampling is done sensibly and thoughtfully, it should give a good representative set for research. In the same way that companies are divided between all declines and a sample of declines, they are also divided on whether they review only transactions that were cancelled automatically or those which were cancelled manually, or both. If you choose only one of those groups, it's worth having an annual or biannual exercise reviewing transactions from the group you usually leave out to make sure you're not missing gold. Some companies also choose to research transactions which were approved on a second attempt from the customer. There are companies who take all of these to have been false declines on the first attempt. This really is a broad brushstroke approach, and it can lead to confusion because there are many reasons for a transaction to fail initially, and that have nothing to do with fraud or the fraud department. And also because fraudsters often try again. And that same thing is true of teams that rely on calls to customer support to flag false declines. Fraudsters have been known to incorporate these calls into their bag of tricks. If you're using either of those approaches, remember, don't mark something as a false decline until enough time has passed that you're confident there won't be a chargeback, because it might not have been false the first time. Whatever method you're using, be consistent about it. You need to be able to track your improvement over time and to see which changes to your system were effective. And that's true for the entire team, not only for individual fraud analysts.
Absolutely. So moving on to our next metric, chargeback recovery rate. That's an interesting one. This metric should be relevant only to first-party fraud chargebacks. These are times when your company is hit by a chargeback that is in itself illegitimate or a scam. Chargeback recovery and fraud prevention are intimately connected in both directions. In one direction, chargeback recovery has a much better chance of disputing the right transaction with the right data as compelling evidence if they work hand in hand with the fraud team. And on the other direction, fraud teams have a better chance of improving their models and rules if they have a clear understanding of which transactions are third-party fraud carried out by the fraudster and which are first-party fraud carried out by the cheating cardholder. You never want your company to dispute third-party fraud. That's a terrible customer experience, and it's completely unfair to both the bank and the customer. Make sure that you invest in distinguishing confidently between professional fraud and those cheating customers. In general, my advice for this metric is that even if it's not in your KPIs, you need to treat it like any other case of fraud analysis. In other words, just dig into the data, check what patterns can you spot within the first-party fraud cases. What signs might your system be able to identify to prevent it in the future? How can you ensure that your system doesn't treat first-party chargeback the same way that it does third-party fraud? You don't want your model to try and incorporate and cluster first-party fraud together with third-party fraud. And lastly, look at the dispute success results and check if there are trends in which banks refer to certain kinds of compelling evidence differently, any insights that can be pulled and help the chargeback recovery team succeed. If there are any changes that you can suggest, then it's a good idea to make sure these changes are also tracked so that you can later present this success to management in the future.
Moving on to metric 3 out of 5. Let's talk about customer service call or chat volume. Again, this isn't a KPI of the fraud team, so it can be overlooked by fraud leaders who focus exclusively on their own results. But as with chargeback recovery, there's a close relationship here between fraud prevention and customer support, and partnering to increase understanding of how fraud policies impact call volume can lead to insights and improvements all round. As a basic rule of thumb, when false declines go up, so does the volume of calls and chats being handled by customer service. Irate or confused customers call in to find out what's going on and sometimes to fix the problem. It's extremely helpful for the fraud team to know when such calls spike, because it's a strong indication that a change to the system has resulted in higher false declines and that something needs adjusting. Getting the news straight from customer support is often the fastest and most useful method. You hear as soon as there's a problem, and you often get useful insights into what the nature of the issue might be. That can help you find a shortcut for working out what you need to change. As always, measure. You want to know what happened, what the effect was, what you did about it, and what the results were. It's important for reporting your team's work properly, and also to use when planning future changes. Equally, there'll be times when an increase in false declines is inevitable. Maybe company policy shifted to prevent serial promotional abusers from placing orders using a promotion, or your business is entering a new market and wants to proceed cautiously. That's part of the ebb and flow of business, but it's wise to let customer support know in advance that this increase in calls and chats will likely be coming their way. Investing in the relationship with customer support can be valuable in the long term as well, because they're the team on the front lines interacting with customers. Many of the fraud teams I know who got on top of refund claims fraud fastest and most effectively when it started exploding, they did that because they were alerted early on by customer support to the fact that the same person was calling multiple times pretending to be different people. That's an incredible insight that they were able to act on and protect the business.
It's such a great example. The fourth metric we want to cover in this video is customer lifetime value. This isn't a traditional fraud prevention metric, but in our opinion, it should be. Fraud teams, we typically look at the value of the specific transaction that we're handling right now in the present. We look at the relevant numbers for chargeback, approval rates, false positives, and so on the perspective of a transaction. But the customer experience of your brand goes far beyond this specific moment, this specific transaction. And ideally, you'd like the moment to be just one instance of a long and happy relationship of your brand with the customer. And fraud prevention plays an important role in making that relationship happen. Fraud teams don't impact average purchase size, of course, not directly, but we do impact both average purchase frequency and average customer lifespan. That's because fraud prevention has an outsized impact on customer experience. Customers who are delayed by manual review or frustrated by friction, which is used to prove their identity or experience a false decline, are far less likely to become regular customers. In fact, one of these experiences can be enough to turn a customer off from returning entirely. Marketing and sales teams aren't always aware of the importance of fraud prevention on their key metrics. And if this is the case in your organization, it's time to start working on a relationship building and education. Go back to video number 2 in the series if you need some ideas. You need a good relationship with the departments to keep a close eye on lifetime value, because you want to be able to track how your fraud work and changes to your methodology impact this metric. It is so vital to the health and future of the business, so it's worth tracking. This is a great way to show that the fraud team is a team player in the company, focused on providing value and supporting the wider company goals.
The final metric that we want to mention in this video is really a subcategory inside customer lifetime value. And that's the impact of account takeovers on customer loyalty. ATO is a fact of online business, unfortunately, but accepting the resulting loss of business doesn't have to be. The first step is to understand the impact, which means track your ATO cases, track the user's activity and their engagement with your brand in the weeks and months following the attack, compared to an average user, and if possible for users who have a long history with your brand, even against their previous histories. Many companies find that users who have suffered an account attack will spend less time on the site or app afterwards. It's a reflection of compromised trust. Once you have a baseline, you can try different approaches in how you handle telling customers about ATO, what kinds of friction you implement to protect against it, and crucially, how you communicate all of that. Try only one thing at a time so that you can be confident in the results. In this way, you can slowly optimize to find the right balance of friction for protection and response post-attack. Of course, you can't do this alone. You need to collaborate with other departments, notably whichever department handles communications of this nature with customers, but perhaps others as well. Once again, this is a really great way to show that your team is part of the wider company, aligned with its goals around customer experience and retention, as well as protection. It's also a great way to show creative out-of-the-box thought and ways to add value for the company. And it's better for the fraud fighting work as well, because you gain a greater understanding of how ATO impacts customers and which methods can be used to prevent it, even if some friction is involved. And you can justify the friction that needs to be involved. If you want to learn more about this metric, there's a fantastic fraudology episode on it entitled The True Cost of Fraud in Online Commerce, and it has case studies.
Case studies are always best.
Mm.
So before we say goodbye, as this is the last video of the series, here's what we hope you took away from this one. First, fraud teams impact the work of other departments far beyond their own, from customer support to payments to marketing and beyond. Second, taking a holistic view on how fraud functions in this organization can lead to both better results for the fraud team long-term and better results for the company as a whole. Third, false declines, chargebacks recovery rate, customer calls to support, customer lifetime value, and the impact of account takeover on customer loyalty to your brand are all powerful additional metrics to track and use to improve, and there can be many more. Just think out of the box. And last but not least, to achieve all this successfully, you need to build strong relationships between the departments and work to partner with relevant departments on measuring the metrics that can help all of you do your jobs better. One final time, measurement and metrics are all about impact. You want to maximize the positive impact you have on your company, measure it, and make sure that leadership and other relevant departments know your success.
We really hope you've enjoyed this video, and of course all of the others in the Measuring What Matters video series. If you have questions related to the course, we'd love to hear from you. In the meantime, give the related quizzes a try to make sure you understood and retained the key points from each video. Good luck!